In the remote mountains of northern Kenya, a retired Marine veteran made a discovery that would challenge everything scientists believed about natural animal behavior. What happened next between two natural enemies became one of the most extraordinary friendships ever documented in the wild. Marcus Thompson had come to the Samburu region seeking solitude after 3 tours of duty left him struggling with memories he couldn't shake. The 34-year-old former sergeant had purchased a small piece of land bordering the vast wilderness, hoping the isolation would help him find peace. His modest cabin sat on a rocky outcrop overlooking miles of acacia-dotted savanna, where elephants moved like gray shadows in the distance, and the calls of exotic birds filled the morning air. For 6 months, Marcus had lived alone, finding comfort in the predictable routines of maintenance work and solitary hikes. The local Samburu people respected his need for space, though they occasionally brought supplies and checked on the quiet American who kept to himself. They called him Bwana Kimya, the silent gentleman, and understood that some warriors needed time to heal away from the noise of civilization. The morning that changed everything started like any other. Marcus rose before dawn, brewed his coffee over a small camp stove, and prepared for his daily patrol of the property boundaries. These walks had become therapeutic, a way to channel his military training into something peaceful. He carried only water, a basic first aid kit, and an old pair of binoculars his father had given him years ago. The East African sun was just breaking over the horizon, painting the landscape in brilliant oranges and golds, when Marcus heard something that made him freeze mid-step. It wasn't the usual symphony of morning wildlife sounds, the chattering of vervet monkeys or the distant roar of lions from the reserve. This was different, smaller, more desperate. High-pitched mewing calls echoed from somewhere near the rocky outcropping about half a mile from his cabin. The sounds were coming in 2 distinct pitches, as if 2 different animals were calling to each other. Marcus's military instincts kicked in immediately. Something was wrong. In his months here, he had learned to read the language of the wilderness, and these weren't the confident calls of healthy animals. Adjusting his backpack and checking his water supply, Marcus began moving toward the source of the sounds with the careful, deliberate steps that had kept him alive in hostile territory thousands of miles away. Marcus approached the rocky outcropping with practiced caution, using the natural cover of scattered boulders and thornbush to mask his movement. The mewing sounds grew louder and more frantic as he drew closer, and he could now distinguish that they were definitely coming from 2 different sources. His trained ear detected distress in those calls, the kind of desperation that spoke of hunger, fear, or both. Crouching behind a large granite boulder, Marcus slowly raised his binoculars and scanned the area ahead. What he saw through the lenses made him question his own eyesight. In a shallow depression between 2 large rocks, partially hidden by overhanging vegetation, were 2 small spotted cats. But these weren't the same species. One was clearly a lion cub, its tawny golden fur marked with the fading spots that young lions carry. The other was smaller, with the distinctive rosette patterns of a leopard cub. They were huddled together for warmth, their tiny bodies pressed against each other as they called out in what Marcus recognized as hunger cries. Marcus lowered the binoculars and rubbed his eyes, certain he was hallucinating. Lions and leopards were natural enemies. Adult leopards would flee from lions, and lions would kill leopard cubs without hesitation. Yet here were 2 cubs, barely a few weeks old by his estimation, treating each other as littermates. He raised the binoculars again for a longer observation. The cubs appeared healthy despite their obvious hunger, with no visible injuries or signs of disease. The lion cub was slightly larger as expected, but both were severely underweight. Their ribs showed through their fur, and their movements were weak and unsteady. Marcus began scanning the surrounding area for any sign of adult cats. In the military, understanding the full tactical situation before taking action had been the difference between life and death. If there were adult lions or leopards nearby, approaching the cubs could trigger a potentially deadly encounter. After 20 minutes of careful observation, Marcus concluded that the cubs were completely alone. No protective mothers lurked in the shadows. No pride members patrolled the area. These babies had been abandoned or orphaned, left to face the harsh reality of the African wilderness without protection. The question that haunted Marcus as he watched them struggle was simple but profound. How had natural enemies ended up as companions, and could they possibly survive together in a world that said they should be apart? Marcus spent the next 4 hours observing the cubs from his concealed position, hoping against hope that their mothers would return. He had witnessed enough nature documentaries and read enough wildlife guides to know that interfering with wild animals was usually the wrong choice. Mother cats often left their young for extended hunting trips, and human intervention could doom the cubs to a life of dependency or prevent natural reunion with their families. But as the sun climbed higher and the temperature soared past 100 degrees Fahrenheit, the cubs' condition deteriorated visibly. They had stopped calling for their mothers and now lay listlessly in whatever shade they could find. The smaller leopard cub had begun to show signs of severe dehydration, sunken eyes and dry gums that Marcus could see even from his distant vantage point. The veteran found himself facing an impossible decision that felt eerily familiar to choices he had been forced to make in combat zones. Follow protocol and procedures, or act on moral instinct when innocent lives hung in the balance. Every wilderness survival guide he had ever read said the same thing. Do not interfere with natural processes, even when they seem cruel. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Yet Marcus couldn't shake the knowledge that these cubs had somehow found each other and chosen companionship over solitude in their final hours. The leopard cub had crawled partially under the lion cub's larger body, seeking comfort and warmth. The lion cub, despite being weak himself, had positioned his body to provide maximum shade for his smaller companion. Marcus pulled out his satellite phone and tried calling Dr. Sarah Kimani, a wildlife veterinarian he had met during his first week in Kenya. The call went straight to voicemail. She was probably out in the field conducting research in one of the more remote conservation areas. The afternoon heat became unbearable, and Marcus watched the cubs, breathing become increasingly shallow and rapid. The leopard cub had stopped moving entirely, though Marcus could still see the faint rise and fall of his tiny chest. The lion cub occasionally lifted his head to nuzzle his companion, as if trying to encourage him to keep fighting. By late afternoon, Marcus realized that waiting for nature to take its course would mean watching 2 remarkable young lives end needlessly. These cubs had already defied every rule of natural behavior by choosing friendship over instinct. Perhaps it was time for him to defy a few rules as well. Marcus made his decision as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, moving with the deliberate precision that military training had ingrained in him. He approached the cubs slowly, speaking in low, calm tones to avoid startling them. His heart pounded as he realized he was about to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. The cubs were too weak to flee when they noticed his approach. The lion cub managed to lift his head and emit a feeble growl that sounded more like a kitten's mew, while the leopard cub remained motionless except for his labored breathing. Up close, Marcus could see just how desperate their situation had become. Their tongues were dry and swollen, their eyes clouded with the beginnings of organ failure. Working quickly but gently, Marcus used his military field training to assess their condition. Both cubs were severely dehydrated and malnourished, but their vital signs suggested they were still within the window where intervention might save them. He carefully lifted the leopard cub first, surprised by how light the small body felt in his hands. The cub was too weak to resist, managing only a soft whimper. When Marcus reached for the lion cub, something extraordinary happened. Instead of trying to protect himself, the slightly larger cub attempted to follow Marcus toward his companion, stumbling on unsteady legs. Even in their weakened state, these natural enemies refused to be separated. Marcus fashioned a makeshift carrier from his backpack and a spare shirt, creating a nest where both cubs could travel together. The journey back to his cabin took twice as long as usual, because he stopped frequently to check on his fragile passengers and to scan for any adult cats that might be tracking their scent. Back at his cabin, Marcus faced the overwhelming reality of what he had committed to. He had no experience raising wild cats, no proper equipment, and no guarantee that his efforts would succeed. His veterinary knowledge extended only to basic field medicine he had learned in the Marines. Using his satellite internet connection, Marcus frantically researched emergency care for orphaned big cat cubs, while simultaneously trying to re-establish contact with Dr. Kimani. The cubs lay together on a pile of soft blankets near his wood stove, their breathing still concerning, but slightly more stable in the controlled environment. As darkness fell over the Kenyan wilderness, Marcus realized he had become the unlikely guardian of two creatures that nature said should be enemies, but who had chosen to face death as friends. Dr. Sarah Kimani arrived at Marcus's cabin 3 hours after midnight, her Land Rover's headlights cutting through the darkness as she navigated the rough mountain road. The wildlife veterinarian had received Marcus's urgent messages when she returned to her research station, and immediately recognized the extraordinary nature of his discovery. In 15 years of working with African big cats, she had never encountered a case of lion and leopard cubs surviving together. Marcus met her at the door, exhaustion etched across his face after hours of monitoring the cubs' vital signs and attempting to provide basic hydration through carefully administered water drops. Dr. Kimani wasted no time on pleasantries, immediately kneeling beside the makeshift nest where the two cubs lay curled together under a heat lamp Marcus had improvised from a desk light. Her initial examination revealed what Marcus had feared. Both cubs were in critical condition, but the leopard cub was closer to organ failure. Working with practiced efficiency, Dr. Kimani administered subcutaneous fluids and emergency nutrients while explaining her findings to Marcus. The cubs appeared to be approximately 4 weeks old, just past the age when they would normally begin transitioning from their mother's milk to solid food. What amazed Dr. Kimani more than their survival was their behavior. Throughout her examination and treatment, the cubs maintained physical contact with each other. When she had to separate them briefly to insert an IV line in the leopard cub, the lion cub became agitated and vocal until they were reunited. This level of bonding between different species at such a young age was unprecedented in her experience. Dr. Kimani explained to Marcus that their chances of survival, while improved with proper medical care, remained uncertain. Cubs this young required feeding every 2 to 3 hours around the clock, specialized nutrition, and constant temperature regulation. More critically, they would need to develop natural behaviors and hunting instincts that typically came from their mothers. But there was another factor that gave Dr. Kimani hope: the strength they seemed to draw from each other. The leopard cub's vitals improved noticeably when positioned next to his lion companion, and the lion cub ate more readily when the leopard was nearby. Their unusual friendship might actually be their greatest asset for survival. As dawn broke over the mountains, Dr. Kimani agreed to help Marcus attempt something that had never been documented in scientific literature: raising two natural enemies as brothers. Over the following weeks, Marcus transformed his cabin into an impromptu wildlife rehabilitation center. Dr. Kimani visited every 3 days to monitor the cubs' progress and adjust their treatment, while Marcus maintained detailed logs of their feeding schedules, weight gain, and behavioral development. The local Samburu community, initially skeptical of the Strange Americans project, gradually became invested in the cubs' survival story. Marcus named the lion cub Jengo, a Swahili word meaning building or construction, reflecting his hopes for the cub's future strength. The leopard cub became Paka, simply meaning cat in Swahili, though his personality proved to be anything but simple. From the beginning, their individual characteristics emerged alongside their unbreakable bond. Jengo showed the confident, social nature typical of lions, but his protective instincts focused entirely on Paka, rather than establishing dominance. When strangers visited the cabin, Jengo would position himself between the visitor and his smaller companion, displaying early leadership behaviors that amazed Dr. Kimani. Lions were naturally social animals, but this level of devotion to a member of another species was extraordinary. Paka, meanwhile, exhibited the cautious intelligence leopards were known for, but with an unusual trust and openness that Dr. Kimani attributed to Jengo's influence. Leopards typically developed into solitary, secretive adults, yet Paka actively sought social interaction and seemed to communicate with Jengo through a complex system of chirps, purrs, and body language that neither Marcus nor Dr. Kimani had observed between different species. Their feeding routines became elaborate affairs that showcased their cooperative nature. Marcus had constructed separate feeding stations to prevent competition, but the cubs refused to eat apart. They would wait for each other, share portions, and even take turns drinking from their water bowls. When Paka struggled with larger pieces of meat due to his smaller size, Jengo would instinctively tear his own food into smaller pieces and push them toward his friend. The most remarkable development occurred during their 6th week of recovery. Marcus observed Jengo teaching Paka hunting behaviors that were distinctly lion-like, while Paka demonstrated climbing techniques that fascinated his larger companion. They were cross-training each other, sharing the survival skills of their respective species in ways that defied everything known about big cat development. Dr. Kimani began documenting their interactions for what she believed would become groundbreaking research in animal behavior and interspecies relationships. The cubs' remarkable partnership faced its greatest challenge when they were 12 weeks old and had grown large enough to venture outside the cabin under Marcus's supervision. What started as a routine morning exploration nearly ended in tragedy when a territorial dispute brought danger directly to Marcus's property. A coalition of 3 adult male lions had been tracking the scent of the cubs for several days, following territorial boundaries that brought them dangerously close to Marcus's land. These males, powerful and aggressive, represented the harsh reality of wild lion society. They would kill any cubs that weren't their own offspring to eliminate competition and assert dominance. Marcus first noticed the threat when his motion-activated cameras captured images of large paw prints near the property's southern boundary. The prints were fresh, and the stride patterns indicated multiple adult males moving together with purpose. His military training kicked in immediately. He recognized a tactical situation that required immediate defensive planning. Dr. Kimani arrived within hours of Marcus's emergency call, bringing with her a tranquilizer rifle and additional security equipment. She confirmed Marcus's worst fears. The coalition was actively hunting the cubs, drawn by their scent trail and the unusual nature of their partnership. In the wild, the strange friendship between Jengo and Paka would be seen as an aberration that needed to be eliminated. The crisis escalated that evening when the coalition breached Marcus's outer perimeter. Security cameras captured the 3 massive males moving through the darkness, their eyes reflecting the infrared lighting as they approached the cabin. Marcus had prepared for this possibility, constructing reinforced barriers and escape routes, but nothing could have prepared him for the cubs' reaction. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Instead of hiding as Marcus had trained them to do, Jengo and Paka moved to the cabin's front window, pressed against the glass, and began vocalizing. Jengo's calls were the deep contact sounds young lions use to communicate with their pride, while Paka made the urgent chuffing sounds leopards use in territorial disputes. They weren't cowering in fear. They were standing together, facing the threat as a unified team. The adult males responded with thunderous roars that shook the cabin's windows and sent every other creature in the area fleeing. But the cubs didn't retreat. Instead, they moved closer together, Jengo placing his body protectively in front of Paka while continuing their defiant chorus. Marcus realized that their extraordinary friendship was about to be tested by the deadliest force in nature, the territorial instincts of adult male lions. The standoff lasted through the night, with a coalition of males circling the cabin while Marcus, Dr. Kimani, and the cubs remained barricaded inside. The adult lions tested every barrier, searching for weaknesses with the methodical patience of experienced predators. Their massive forms cast moving shadows against the reinforced windows as they prowled the perimeter, occasionally releasing roars that rattled the entire structure. At dawn, the situation reached its breaking point. The largest of the 3 males, a battle-scarred veteran with a distinctive torn ear, began charging the cabin's reinforced door. His 400-pound frame struck the barrier repeatedly, each impact sending vibrations through the building. Marcus knew their defenses wouldn't hold much longer against such determined assault. Dr. Kimani made the decision to use the tranquilizer rifle, but as she prepared her shot through a specially designed port, Jengo broke free from Marcus's restraining arms. The young lion, now weighing nearly 40 pounds, squeezed through a gap in the barriers that Marcus had thought was too small for him to navigate. Paka immediately followed, his leopard agility allowing him to slip through even more easily. Within seconds, both cubs were outside the cabin, facing 3 adult males who could kill them with single swipes of their massive paws. What happened next defied every principle of animal behavior that Dr. Kimani had studied. Instead of attacking the cubs immediately, the adult males stopped their assault and began investigating these strange young cats who refused to show fear. Jengo positioned himself directly in front of the largest male and began making submission sounds, but not the typical submissive postures of a defeated animal. Paka, meanwhile, displayed a behavior Dr. Kimani had never witnessed before. He began grooming Jengo's main area while maintaining eye contact with the adult males, a gesture that somehow communicated their unbreakable bond. The leopard cub was essentially introducing himself as part of Jengo's family unit. The scarred male approached within inches of the cubs, sniffing them thoroughly while releasing low rumbling sounds that weren't quite roars but weren't entirely peaceful either. For 20 terrifying minutes, the fate of the cubs hung in the balance as the adults processed this unprecedented situation. Then, in a moment that would change everything Marcus and Dr. Kimani believed about lion social behavior, the large male began grooming Jengo with his massive tongue, accepting both cubs into his temporary protection. The coalition's acceptance of the cubs transformed the entire dynamic of Marcus's wildlife sanctuary. Within days, word of the extraordinary encounter spread through the international scientific community, drawing researchers from universities across 3 continents. Dr. Kimani found herself coordinating with behavioral specialists from Oxford, wildlife biologists from the Smithsonian, and animal psychologists from Tokyo University, all eager to study this unprecedented case of interspecies social integration. Marcus reluctantly agreed to allow limited scientific observation, but only under strict conditions that prioritized the cubs' welfare over research opportunities. His cabin became the center of a carefully controlled study environment, with remote cameras and monitoring equipment that could document the cubs' development without human interference. The 3 adult males established a protective perimeter around Marcus's property, effectively claiming the area as their temporary territory. This created an extraordinary situation where Jengo and Paka could experience natural lion social dynamics while maintaining their unique friendship. The largest male, whom Marcus named Askari after the Swahili word for soldier, became particularly attached to both cubs, often seen grooming them and teaching them hunting techniques. Paka's integration into this makeshift pride challenged fundamental assumptions about leopard development. Instead of developing the typical solitary behaviors of his species, he began exhibiting modified pride dynamics while retaining his leopard-specific skills. He learned to hunt cooperatively like a lion, yet maintained the climbing and stealth abilities that were uniquely leopard traits. The scientific implications became staggering. Dr. Kimani's preliminary findings suggested that social development in big cats was far more flexible than previously understood. The cubs were essentially creating a new behavioral template, combining the cooperative hunting strategies of lions with the individual adaptability of leopards. International media coverage brought global attention to the story, with documentary crews requesting access and conservation organizations citing the cubs as examples of nature's remarkable adaptability. Marcus found himself reluctantly thrust into the spotlight, giving interviews about his experience while trying to maintain the cubs' peaceful environment. The Kenyan Wildlife Service officially recognized Marcus as a licensed wildlife rehabilitator, providing legal protection for his unusual sanctuary. Local Samburu elders declared the area blessed, incorporating the cubs' story into their oral traditions as a symbol of unity transcending natural boundaries. 6 months after their rescue, Jengo and Paka had grown into healthy adolescents, whose friendship continued to astound everyone who observed them. Today, 3 years after that life-changing morning in the Kenyan mountains, Jengo and Paka continue to rewrite the rules of what's possible in the natural world. Now fully grown, with Jengo weighing nearly 300 pounds and Paka a sleek 120 pounds, their friendship has evolved but never wavered. They hunt together using techniques that combine lion pack strategies with leopard stealth, creating a hunting partnership so effective that it has influenced how researchers understand predator cooperation. Marcus has transformed his property into the Samburu Interspecies Research Center, a facility that attracts scientists from around the world studying animal behavior, social development, and conservation strategies. The center operates on principles Marcus learned from his military service: discipline, respect for the mission, and unwavering commitment to those under his protection. He has trained a small team of local Samburu rangers who help monitor the cats and maintain the research protocols. The ripple effects of Jengo and Paka's story extend far beyond academic research. Their friendship has become a symbol for conservation efforts across East Africa, inspiring a new generation of wildlife protectors and generating funding for habitat preservation programs. Children in Nairobi schools learn about the lion and leopard who chose friendship over instinct, while international conservation organizations use their story to demonstrate nature's capacity for adaptation and cooperation. Dr. Kimani's research has been published in 17 peer-reviewed journals and has fundamentally changed how scientists approach interspecies relationships. Her work with the cubs led to discoveries about neuroplasticity in young mammals and the role of early social experiences in shaping adult behavior patterns. Universities now offer courses in interspecies behavioral development, using Jengo and Paka as primary case studies. For Marcus, the cubs represent something even more profound than scientific breakthrough. They taught a combat veteran struggling with isolation and trauma that healing often comes through unexpected connections, and that the strongest bonds can form between the most unlikely companions. In caring for two orphaned enemies who became brothers, Marcus found his own path back to peace and purpose. The story continues to unfold daily in the Kenyan wilderness, where a lion and leopard prove that friendship knows no boundaries, and where a former soldier discovered that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with compassion, patience, and an unwavering belief in the power of connection to overcome any obstacle nature can create. As the sun sets over the Samburu landscape each evening, visitors to the research center witness something that never loses its magic. Jengo and Paka can be found on their favorite rocky outcrop, the same formation where Marcus first discovered them as dying cubs, now healthy and magnificent, grooming each other as they watch the African horizon. Their daily ritual has become legendary among the research staff. Every evening at exactly 6:30 p.m., the two cats climb to the highest point of the rocks and sit together, Jengo's golden mane flowing in the wind, while Paka's spotted coat catches the last rays of sunlight. They remain there for precisely 20 minutes, as if reflecting on their incredible journey from abandoned enemies to inseparable brothers. Marcus often joins them during this evening ceremony, sitting quietly on a nearby boulder with his journal, documenting their behaviors while marveling at how far they've all come. The three survivors, a broken veteran and two orphaned cubs, found healing in each other's company and created something beautiful from what seemed like certain tragedy. Their story proves that the most extraordinary friendships often emerge from the most impossible circumstances, and that love truly knows no boundaries, whether between species, between former enemies, or between a wounded soldier and the wild creatures who helped him find his purpose. What started as a desperate rescue mission in the Kenyan wilderness became a testament to the power of compassion, the resilience of nature, and the incredible bonds that can form when we choose love over fear. If this story of unlikely friendship and second chances touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories from the natural world. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that hope can be found in the most unexpected places. And let us know in the comments what unlikely friendships have changed your life.